I recently took a trip to Portugal with a couple of my friends, Faisal and Mate, and I brought along a new sidekick, the Fujifilm X-T5. I looked at that trip as the perfect opportunity to break in a new camera and see how I like it as a main body. So in this video, I want to discuss my first impressions of the Fujifilm X-T5. I've been using the X-T3 for a little over 3 years now. I haven't really felt any sort of pressure or need to upgrade from the X-T3 until recently. See, as I've grown an interest in creating video work, I've started to actually run into some barriers with the X-T3. In general, I prefer to just take one camera with me when I'm out shooting. So because of this, I essentially had to use the X-T3 as a hybrid system for both photo and video. Switching from photo to video or video to photo, then getting your settings right, and finally composing the shot that you want, it all just kind of took too long to do in camera. So I knew I ultimately needed a camera that acted better as a hybrid. And that's where the real first draw, at least for me, came in when it comes to the X-T5. The still/movie dial was actually introduced on the predecessor to the X-T5, I believe the X-T4, but I'm really glad that they decided to keep this feature and carry it over to the X-T5 as well. The little switch basically just allows you to immediately switch from, photography, from stills mode over to movie mode. And you're able to do this using that dial without having to mess with any other areas of the camera. So if I'm taking a video clip, but I notice something photo-worthy is about to happen, I can really easily switch back to still mode. The coolest thing about it is when you switch, it actually saves all of your exposure settings in that respective mode. For example, in still mode, I can set my shutter speed to, 1/125th of a second, and in video mode, have it at 1/48th of a second. They basically just stay assigned to their own respective shutter speeds. Say you're shooting a video clip, but you see a photo opportunity approaching. Instead of fumbling around with the camera like I was with the X-T3 to get the settings right and get prepared, I can literally just switch the mode right back over to stills and be ready for that photo almost instantly. The ability to shoot hybridly without any hiccups is probably the thing that, if I had to say, I'm enjoying about this camera the most so far. Aside from the actual build quality, which I'll point out later in the video, I of course really enjoy the feel of this camera, just ergonomically in general. It's really similar to the X-T3, which I was really used to and very comfortable with. You've got a grip on the front of the camera. A top-down view essentially gives you a quick glance at the settings that you're using, and they're all baked into these beautiful film-looking dials. It also has a pull-out screen that can be looked at both with a horizontal and a vertical orientation. In terms of a design and just like an overall look and feel, it pretty much mimics the X-T3. So I know I'm a little biased here because that's been my favorite camera to use for the last couple of years, but I really can't say enough how much, for me at least, this camera has been a really good fit on from an ergonomics perspective. It just fits nicely into my hand, and I just love the look and feel overall. I am not an expert by any means on image quality, but what I can say, coming from the X-T3, which has an older 26 megapixel sensor, and now using the X-T5, which obviously has a newer 40 megapixel sensor and a faster processor, there's definitely just a general increase in image quality overall. But this jump in resolution, image quality, that sort of thing, it's not really something that I considered when I went to purchase this camera, and it's not really something that motivates me to use it at all. For my photography purposes, I was perfectly content with the X-T3 and the resolution and image quality that I was getting from that camera. So resolution and just like that image quality jump in general, it's really not a huge factor for me. That said, I would imagine if I was to start printing my work more often, I'd probably notice it at some points. But again, it's really not something that I feel drawn to or really care about that much. One thing I do want to point out though is I mentioned it does have a little bit faster of a processor. Even just going through the menus and changing settings, I notice it responds to me a little bit quicker than the X-T3, which is obviously a 6 or 7 year old camera at this point. It's nice when you're out shooting and you can quickly and easily make adjustments to a camera, not have to be you know, held back by the computer inside it, essentially. So something I definitely like a lot about it. I love shooting in low light. It's one of my favorite times to shoot. That was something I was really curious to see how the X-T5 would perform in low light scenarios like blue hour or, you know, the middle of the night, and especially at higher ISOs, which I do use consistently, you know, 3200 or even higher. I'll be completely honest, I was actually kind of shocked by this, but I don't really see that big of an improvement in the low light image quality. There still seems to be a pretty comparable amount of noise, and particularly like color noise on darker images with the X-T5. And I did a little digging online and found some forums that actually talk about this and how that's due to the increase in the sensor resolution, that it's just more difficult to reduce noise on a bigger sensor. So what I will say is for low light situations, especially handheld, the X-T5 has definitely been a game changer for sure. The X-T5 has, I believe, 7-stop image stabilization or in-body image stabilization. And that's pretty insane. You know, if I hold my breath, I can use shutter speeds as low as 1/8 of a second, sometimes even lower, and still get a perfectly clean, perfectly sharp image, which is just incredible. It was on the X-T3, which I don't think has any in-body image stabilization at all. I can get away with, you know, 1/15 of a second, something like that, but getting too low, I start to see visible camera shake. That's definitely cool. It's an awesome feature that the X-T5 has, and something I'll probably use occasionally for sure. Helps me use lower ISOs, it helps keep my images cleaner. So in that way, the low light images are kind of cleaner on the X-T5, but not due to the sensor. It's really the IBIS that plays a role. When it was first put in my hands, the very first thing that I noticed about the camera was that it felt very plastic almost. Coming from the X-T3, the X-T5 in comparison just kind of felt like a toy almost, particularly the screen. It feels like the screen is not just plastic itself, but that the bars on the sides that fix the screen to the camera are also kind of made of some type of plastic. And I'm just concerned, like, one wrong move or one, you know, stronger tug on the screen is gonna rip it off the camera body. I've heard similar complaints in other videos about the X-T5 on YouTube, just regarding the build quality in general and how in comparison to other XT models, it's just very different. It's probably in part due to them trying to make the camera lighter. That would be a guess of mine. I personally would rather have a slightly heavier camera with a better build. It doesn't really affect the photography process per se. Like, I'm still gonna probably get similar images on the X-T5 that I would on the X-T3. It's more of just a pet peeve from the design perspective. There are a bunch of other things I could talk about with this camera, but I really have only shot with it for like 2 or 3 weeks now. These are just my first impressions, my first thoughts on the camera. What I am confident in is that this is going to replace the X-T3 in my kit as, you know, a main camera body, something that I can use for both photo and video on a day-to-day basis. So in the foreseeable future, I'm sure I'm gonna have more thoughts on it, and then maybe I can sit down and do a proper full review of the camera. If you've been using the X-T5 yourself and you have any thoughts on the camera, or maybe any setup tips that you want to share with me or other people watching the video, definitely drop a comment below and I'll take a look at those. On another note, I'll obviously be releasing some video from the trip that I referenced, the Portugal trip. So be on the lookout for that. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you're interested in seeing more of my photos from that trip. That said, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, please leave a like. And again, consider subscribing to the channel for more videos like this. I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Take care.